Hi, I'm Ozzy. I'm a board member with the Diverse Emerging Music Organization, and we are a local nonprofit who presents educational programming and information, and even just a place to get on stage for developing artists or developing people in the entertainment industry. And our next series of panels at McNamara Smith is going to be about the variety of careers in the entertainment industry, and we're starting with radio today. And we have a distinguished panel of guests to talk about all of the different facets of radio and how it continues to be so strong even today in the digital age. So we'll start by just having everyone kind of go down the line and introduce themselves and just give a quick career overview, where you've been, where you are now. So we'll start with John.
I'm John Schubert, and I started at Radio K as the music and program director there. And I was there for about 3 years, then moved over to the Current, first under a mentorship program, then I became a local music producer, then a digital producer, and the music assistant now. I produce a local show, a few other shows, serve as the assistant to the music department with David Safar, who's the music director. And I host overnights, weekends, and fill-ins for daytime, just like Mark Weed and the like.
Awesome.
My name is John Michaels. I went to Brown, what was then Brown Institute, now Brown College here, years ago to get into radio. Worked at a bunch of different radio stations around the Midwest. Working my way back here to the Twin Cities about 20 years ago. Worked at K102. I spent 9 years as the director of the Total Traffic division here in Minneapolis, so overseeing all the traffic reports that run on all the Clear Channel stations and some of the other stations in town and in the upper Midwest. And then most recently, right now I work at a company called 9 Ball Radio that does show prep services for morning shows on radio stations across the country, helping in morning shows with some of the preparation kind of stuff that they need for their shows in the morning.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Allie. I work at 93X on the Half-Assed Morning Show, and I started at Radio K when I was in high school on a group called The Breakfast Club, and then I worked at an independent rock station in Santa Barbara called KJEE for 4.5 years when I went to college. And then I worked in music management in Los Angeles for a while, which is kind of just like glorified babysitting. And then I came back here and got a job at 93X as a night person and sort of like worked my way up, and now I'm here.
I'm Fallon. I guess I do the morning show on KDWB with Dave Ryan, and I started in Indiana where I'm from and kind of did everything. Started out doing the promotions, then did weekends, then did nights for 3 years, then moved to mornings, and then moved to Reno, Nevada, and did mornings for a couple of years, and now I've been here for almost 2 years.
I'm Paul Lambert from the Power Trip Morning Show and K-Fan. They call me Beat Sauce, which I don't like to admit in a social setting. And I started at Jack FM as an overnight board op, and then interned at K-Fan for a while, and then just kind of did some board op work there. And then, as Allie said, I just kind of worked my way in, right place at the right time onto the Power Trip Morning Show, and I do just about anything they need off the air, on the air at K-Fan and Clear Channel.
Super. So as you can see, it runs the gamut from radio to the technically nonprofit at the Current to the biggest stations in town. And despite what you may have heard about digital overtaking everything, there's a couple statistics. One that we all probably saw last week, that as far as music goes, radio is still the #1 way that people discover new music. Nielsen said last week 63% of listeners discover new music through terrestrial radio, which they consider trusted and current sources of new music. And I guess that leads into the question, how much control do you have over the music? I'm sure John has probably more control over what the Current plays than Allie or Fallon do. How much control do you have over what music is played?
So the music and program departments at the Current, so we have a set of current categories, which is like 6 or 7 categories where all new music gets programmed into. And then we have a set of about 10 other categories, which are all of our gold, our image, our variety songs. And all of the music is scheduled with an automatic scheduler in Music Master, which is our software. And 60% of that cannot be altered. Those are the currents. That's our new music rotation. And the other 40% can be altered by the hosts. And so they program that portion of those shifts. And then it's up to them to contextualize the rest of the new music that's already scheduled for them.
Are there meetings about
Yeah.
new music and stuff?
Yep, yeah, there's a music meeting with just the music and programming departments every single week. And then we also do meetings once a month with the entire staff of the Current where we talk about the new music and what's working and what isn't. And then we'll do public music meetings, mostly at the Amsterdam, which is something we're trying to do quarterly, where we get 200 to 300 listeners in one room, and we play songs that haven't been heard before. We get them as exclusives from record labels and promoters, and then we have the audience vote on them, and that will determine some of the ads in the coming weeks after that. So.
And there's the online system, you have everything cataloged, playlist, you can rate songs. Does that figure into anything?
It does, to an extent. I mean, if something's really not working, like, listeners will let us know. Since they have a founding interest in the station because it's a nonprofit and they're giving money, we do have a responsibility to listen to them to a certain extent. But at the same time, if something's really, really popular out there in the world, even if the listeners aren't reacting that well to it, it's still our responsibility to share that music and see how it goes.
Yeah. So 60-40, like how does that compare to, you know, a station like KWB or 93X? Do you get any choice at all?
No, there's no 60-40.
It's all
Well, it's kind of, I mean, there are similar things. Obviously, like our music director, our program director have weekly meetings to see what they're going to add, what they're going to rotate to a power position, which would be the most played song, the song you hear on Katie probably every 30 or 45 minutes. Katie is a leader on adding new music. I guess before some other stations, as far as like pop music goes. And we, like on our morning show, obviously we can add like a song or two if we want, but we're not touching what's scheduled. If we run out of time, we can drop a song that isn't a power song, but it's pretty controlled because the music is tested and they know what works. And then we have a staff meeting each week where we don't judge the music, but we know the top downloaded songs in Minnesota every week, and that helps our program director and music director decide kind of what to play.
What's 93X like?
We used to have like a really huge research department, and people just like making calls and that sort of thing, like maybe 50 to 75 people, like every night. But when we got bought out by a different company, that sort of changed. So now I know that our music director and our program director do have meetings about adding new music, and they do like to take chances on newer songs, and we try that out in our cage match, which is every night. Yeah, so people sort of vote, so that gives us a good idea if people like the song or not too. And then, yeah, I try to sneak in like maybe some local bands sometimes, like into the cage match, just because I think that, you know, it's hard for, like, having worked at a record label, like, I understand how hard it is to even get signed. So it's nice to have them get that exposure, even if it doesn't really go anywhere for them. I know it's very exciting to have your song on the radio.
Well, this is really exciting that we see the whole gamut. John can play whatever he wants, Valen can't play anything, and Ellie can play a little bit of both. And like, we have everything you need.
But I guess it's important to note that like rotations across every radio station, no matter format, have tight-ends, because they are testing audiences, and it's all about listeners and profit.
So when you talk about that, so these pre-programmed songs, that kind of testing, where is that? Is that in New York and LA? Someone's doing that, or is that local? Are they testing by market or?
I think it's a mix of things. I mean, there are charts, it's by stations. That's how they get added on other stations, because they can say something like maybe a city in Milwaukee, 93X added the song, KDWB added the song, so then they want to add it, and then you start getting the additional feedback, like the local downloads, how well it's doing, and you know, I mean, I guess they could go a step further in a PPM world where they could see if it's a total tune out, because you can really track it down to the minute. But I think it starts, yes, where with like larger markets adding
She
it.
just mentioned PPM, which is, I forget exactly what, portable people meter, I think? Personal people meter. And I have a stat about that too. Broadcast radio's reach is 77% of U.S. adults will be within earshot of radio once a week, at least. Up to, it's like 190 million people. And the ad revenue, I just saw it today on one of the trades, that on average, radio advertisers get their money back 7.7 times over, which is the second only to television. So as far as percentage of reach and people discovering the music and advertising revenue, everything's looking pretty strong, unless anyone knows differently. Okay, so there's the music part of it, and but radio doesn't have to have anything to do with music. Paul is a sports guy.
Yeah, we have, when we do our show, we have certain things that we do at the top of each hour. We do a top, it's called Fan 5, and it's the top 5 sports stories we do at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock. The only music we play is coming in and out of break, and if it depends on between the two other guys on the show what it's going to be. If it's Chris Hockey, the producer, it's going to be Wasp or Rat or something.
But you get to choose.
Yeah, we can. I mean, unless we started playing, something offensive, which we couldn't, they would probably say something. But so it's kind of all over the board with what we like to play. But yeah, that's the only music we play. But we have to fill, about 44 minutes of actual talking. So,
Sure.
It goes into it a lot with the sports aspect, but you got to look at, what had happened the night before and all that. So it's a fun gig, but it's got its ups and downs, especially when sports teams in this market are so bad. You get tired of talking about the 2-7 Vikings and the 90+
Is the
loss
talk,
team.
are the calls and the talk better when the team's winning or losing?
We don't, our show on the morning show, we don't normally take calls, but I'm the pessimist I am. I prefer and I think most fans prefer when they're bad, because if everything's good, like in 2009 with Brett Favre and they were really good, the Vikings, I mean, what are you gonna talk about? Oh, they won again.
Yeah.
But when they're bad, there's more to talk about. There's more turmoil, the team's falling apart, it's almost like a Hollywood movie. So I think it's better when the teams are bad.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
I would think it would be better ratings from my standpoint. Because if you turn on the radio every day and it's, wow, Brett Favre threw for, if he was still here to be weird, but, we won again 35-10. Adrian Peterson ran for 200 yards. Or, the team's fighting on the sidelines, there's grown men beating each other up. That, I think, is more entertaining. If it's the same thing over and over again, you get kind of bored.
Well, you're not purely news, it's entertainment. Sports is entertainment, right?
Yeah, I think that would probably go for all of us. I mean, as you said,
Well,
it's the entertainment
the
business.
drama, just like the drama that has to be created through group therapy or War of the Roses or whatever, just comes naturally out of the, drama is that's what people are looking for, I think, right?
Yeah.
Well, okay, so the opposite of drama, John, traffic. How, well, I guess
make this transition.
sometimes. Okay, so music programming, talk programming, traffic, intermittent between programming. I know nothing about how total traffic works.
What I did was, and I was there, like I said, with Clear Channel for 9 years, running the total traffic division, and they, it's the traffic reports for all the radio stations, and every radio station handled it differently. There were, at the time when we started, 7 radio stations in the Twin Cities that were Clear Channel stations that we did reports for, and then expanded, we did other ones around the upper Midwest, but part of my job was to hire, and we're talking about jobs in radio, was to hire people that had enough flexibility in their sound and in their presentation to work on different radio stations. So we had the same person, the same woman in the morning was on doing traffic on K102 and serving as kind of a sidekick or sounding board with the morning show, and then also was on KDWB, and to do that, and she may be on the news talk station as well. And they had to be somebody who's flexible enough, not that they would have a twang for the country station necessarily, but they would know enough about the music, know about the lifestyle of those listeners to adjust it. When you get to the traffic is the traffic pretty much on all these. But the people that we hired were hired for their versatility in a lot of cases to be able to switch between these different stations, and you flip over, and in the afternoon, when I was on most often, I would go between KDWB, where they play a little music bed, and it's and then here's John with the traffic, and then I'm doing that high energy kind of thing, and then you flip over and I'm on Cities 97, and hey, let's check in with the traffic right now, what's going on, and I'm Mr. Mello in there, and smoke a quick bowl, is this being taped?
Yeah. I told you that.
So as far as, it was an interesting thing. Now, unfortunately, and this gets into another area as far as corporate ownership and things like that. As a big corporate entity with Clear Channel as a money-saving effort, they ended up moving our whole department to Chicago. And so we all were out of work about a year and a half ago. But while it lasted, it was a good opportunity for people to experience a whole bunch of different formats and do a lot of different kinds of things. And then also, so the people that we hired, again, if we're talking about jobs, the people that were doing that were personalities primarily, and then they were also kind of news people too, because they're delivering this information in a clear and concise way, the traffic information. But in some cases, that was kind of secondary to the fact that they were a sidekick-ish kind of presence on some of these radio shows.
There's a team of people out figuring out the traffic.
Yes, well, not out.
They're listening to other stations and seeing the traffic.
They're listening to scanners. I mean, the way we gathered it, and most people gather, is listening to scanners, looking at cameras. There's 450 some cameras around the Twin Cities where you can be watching all these cameras and seeing what's going on, listening to scanners, calling the sheriff's department, what's going on, kind of stuff, gathering all that information, which is then what we used on the air.
So a whole massive infrastructure and company for little, for little tidbits of traffic. Lots of different stations.
Well, what we did,
I'm just saying, that's what we're getting at. You wouldn't think of that as a radio channel.
And another
That's
thing,
a huge company.
people don't realize and is the traffic information. Clear Channel, stop me if I'm getting off onto a tangent here as far as,
Hey,
but
please.
when you're talking about all the things that where the tentacles kind of go out, the traffic information that we gathered and you heard on the radio was also put into a computer system, and it goes to GPS systems. So we were also the local, in all the markets that we were in as Clear Channel, we were the local connection to your GPS system. So when your GPS system says bad traffic ahead, there's an accident, all that was coming from your Clear Channel radio station, whether it's here, whether it's Milwaukee, whether it's Los Angeles or wherever. All that stuff was the same information that we were gathering to use on the radio was also being sent. And that's a revenue stream for the company because they're being paid by Garmin or TomTom or these other companies to provide all this traffic information.
Sure. Yeah. Well, speaking of getting paid by other companies, has anybody done voiceover, freelance voiceover?
No. No. I haven't even looked into doing voice work or anything. I know Dave has, but
Sure.
I
We're
think
like a company will hire Dave specifically to be the voice of that product.
Dave was the voice for Quiznos, like national, which is funny. And he's been in the various movies that have been shot in Minnesota.
Oh, right, yeah.
He was in Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah, he's in Grand Theft Auto. So he's done voiceovers, but I haven't myself,
Okay.
no.
I haven't really, I sort of looked into it, but someone let me know that I think the booking rate, I think if you get 4% of the auditions you go on, that's really high. Like, that's
Right,
really
right.
good. So think about that, and then,
Well,
Also,
and
you're
if you're
competing.
an established voice, they'll come to you, right?
yeah.
I think probably eventually, yeah. So how long does it take to
Takes a while.
build up?
Yeah.
To that point.
Yeah.
For one gig.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I'm just thinking of how long Mae Young has been the voice of Home Furniture.
Yeah.
That might even be one of her only gigs, but it must be a good one.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, that's
But
the
she
beauty
had,
of
but I
it.
think she had to be Mae Young before.
True.
Or maybe she auditioned and was one of the.
Mm.
She has a really interesting voice, too.
Yeah, that's true.
Mhm.
I think she's been like
Forever.
forever. This is the kind of thing you can stick with for a long time.
Yeah.
The Menards guy, I used to work with the voice of the not the old guy on television, but the voice on the radio. He does a morning show out of Eau Claire or whatever. He's had it, again, for like 10, 15. Okay, the threat of digital. If if Wi-Fi and streaming gets into cars, will that finally affect these rock solid numbers of terrestrial radio? Because I think most, like, I know you guys podcast already, so it's already sort of digital ready, but can terrestrial radio switch over to long form digital podcasts? You know, is it gonna matter if it gets into cars? Anybody want to talk about that?
I don't think that transition is gonna fully, I don't think it'll ever fully happen, and if it does, it will not happen for a long time. But, that being said, all these new digital innovations, like, I think the broadcasting world is obviously very aware of it. They've been aware for a long time and have taken the steps to start adopting some of it. I wouldn't be surprised if these new cars who on their dashboards have like the Pandora channel and the Spotify channel already built in, if eventually you're gonna see stations, like Clear Channel stations on there, and then nonprofit stations like the current or NYC or something like that. It doesn't really hurt that much, I don't think, from the analysis that's already come in. If anything, it's a major tool, and you just gotta take it and see what you can do with it.
Yeah.
But, you know,
I totally agree. I think everyone has been afraid forever that radio is going to go away. It started with like XM and satellite, then it was like the iPod's going to kill radio, and it's the thing you have to remember is radio is free, and so far nothing else is free. So the majority of people are going to want free, and you know, and I think like for instance, Clear Channel, they're thinking about this. We have iHeartRadio now, so it's the exact same thing as Pandora, except you can also listen already to all of our live radio stations. I mean, everything's the same, and I actually think it's better than Pandora, and that's not because I work for the company at all. I have both on my phone, but I don't see it hurting at all. I think it may, you know, because, and another thing is, people may not realize this either, but they like personalities. Maybe not everyone, but the majority they like to hear people talk. You could listen to your iPod all day, but the reason people listen to radio for the most part, I think, is because they want to hear the personalities. They want to hear what happened the day before. It's because it's like listening to a reality show. At least that's how we feel like our show is, like a reality show. And so I don't know. I don't, unless they start also adding personalities on all of those streaming stations, which Pandora doesn't do right now. I just don't see it really affecting us.
Well, would it affect you at all to podcast instead of, do you guys podcast?
Yeah, we podcast our show, and people, I mean, I think that there's a good majority of them, especially in like the Twitter world, that let you know when like something's wrong with the podcast. I mean, there are people that, you know, out of state, we get a lot of emails from people in the military that are like, you know, this is the closest thing we have to being at home and all that. So there's a chunk of people that listen to it via podcast, but without the radio, you don't have the podcast. You know, if they got rid of what we do, you wouldn't have us be doing the podcast. But I mean, I think as Fallon said, I think the best advice in the radio business is it's free. Cable TV you got to pay for. I mean, it's just the fact that it's there. You never have to pay for it, which I think makes it it's tough to beat. It's almost a juggernaut in its own way. What are you going to do? If they started charging you for a radio, yeah, you may be in trouble. But
Well, it didn't work for Sirius.
yeah,
Yeah.
it worked for Howard Stern, but
Well.
yeah.
Okay. Fallon, you said like listening to a reality show. Do you feel a pressure to be entertaining and sort of a personality, like, you know, on Twitter and Facebook when you're going out to promotional events? Is becoming a radio host in a market on a major station almost like becoming a local celebrity?
I think so. Well, I mean, the number one thing when I got my job was like, I've interviewed a lot of girls that don't want to talk about their boyfriend and don't want to talk about this. If you don't want to talk about that, that's cool, but you can't be on my show. You got to be honest. You got to talk about everything, and I'm cool with that. I share too much information all the time, and I regret it because then I meet someone that's like 95 years old, and I'm thinking, my God, what did I say yesterday? And they listened with their grandkid in the car. But Minneapolis was a really weird move for me, and what I mean by that is the way how involved with social media people here are compared to other markets I've worked in. I've never, like, I went from, okay, like 3,000 fans in Reno to 30,000 fans on Facebook in Minnesota. It's
Oh.
unbelievable, the difference. And it's just because people are so socially active here. So while like in Reno or Indiana, occasionally and rarely people would maybe recognize my voice. Minnesota, they recognize how I look. And so it's very different, I think. I don't know. I don't know that I act any different. I think since we're pretty honest on the air, I don't have to change, fortunately. But I do know a lot of people that have to kind of be a personality. So I don't know how difficult it might be for them. But luckily I get to just be the same old country bumpkin I am in real life.
Are you yourself an 93X, or do you have to sort of macho? Or,
No, I recently started working on the morning show in August, and like their first thing was, hey, we like you because you're you, and we don't want you to put on any sort of like fake personality or try to be like this like hot, crazy party chick, because that's really not who I am, and they constantly make fun of me for being like a prude and, you know.
I get that too,
Yeah. So.
Right. So really, what you're both saying is honesty. It's kind of the trait you're looking for, is to not put on something, not put on the radio voice, and not put on.
Yeah, when
Yeah.
you hear the radio voice,
Yeah.
I'm hoping we can completely move away from that at some point. And I can't even, like, our station still has some of that, so.
Yeah, so do we.
It's just, I don't know why some people do it.
We won't find it there.
Well, no, we have the public radio version of the radio. This would be very bad.
Is it like super deep and
Yeah.
like, okay.
Super deep and contemplative and slow.
Yeah. I love it.
I think what's more annoying is when people forget that they're on the radio and they just kind of like start thinking to themselves and start going talking too much.
Stream of consciousness.
Oh
Get back to
God,
it.
we get off on tangents all the time. It's probably bad. Yeah, because we don't play a lot of music on our show either, so we have a lot of room for that.
Well, that kind of leads into talking about prep services, I think. John and I work for what's called a show prep service, which is like the bigger shows. Like, the way I like to explain this to people, like Howard Stern has a guy, I forget his name, who he just pays to watch TV and pull clips from television. That's the guy's complete job. You remember his name?
No,
Oh.
his TV watching guy?
Yeah. Anyway, but you know, and you know, and they have you know, one guy to research news, one person to do this. Well, a prep service where we have a guy to watch TV too, but he does it for 100 shows instead of one. And I comb through all the news every day to create a more concise blog. We have pre-produced bits, like you know, when you're hearing someone be prank called on the radio. We can pre-produce those for each morning shows. It's sort of.
It's hard to explain to people outside the
Who
business.
never- yeah,
They don't know that it even exists.
I had no idea it existed before
Yeah.
I started working there.
They assume that everything's just made up on the fly, or that people do gather this information themselves, and you do it to a certain point. On the morning shows, you gather that information. But it's something so that they can come in a little later and don't have to go through everything about who was on Leno last night, and what happened in the news last night, and what are
Did
people
anything
talking
break
about.
at 3 a.m.?
Yeah, what's on Twitter and all these kinds of informational kind of stuff. And it's changed more. When I was coming up in radio, there wasn't anything really like this, but there were tons of joke services. That's all. Morning shows could subscribe to joke services with funny gags and lines that you could use on the radio. And there's still some of that, but there's not that much of that. But it's more gone because the radio stations, like these guys have been talking about, have gone to more personality, where it's real life, it's a reality show, it's human beings talking about real things. So the stuff that we do, the joke services of old, are now the prep services like what we do, with gathering information and helping them with those kinds of, with premises that they
Well,
can
there's
talk
so much
about on
out
the
there
radio.
every day now that we have to comb through all of the stuff and pick out.
Right,
the
such
stuff
a
that's
huge
relevant
amount of
to radio.
information for them to gather too.
And that saves, unfortunately, that saves positions at the radio station, which would normally be jobs. I guess, well, not
Most of the
not for
stations we
20
deal with
years,
still
but,
have
yeah.
a producer on the morning show, a person off or on the air that still facilitates all that kind of stuff. And these guys can talk more about that if you want to talk about what the producer does. But that's another mostly off air, but some are on the air as well, or a combination of that. That's an interesting job to get into. Especially if you're super organized and super anal, I think that helps with that. I don't know, you want to talk about what a producer does?
Well, I think John should talk about, you produced 3 or 4 shows, you said, right? What does a radio producer do?
Yeah.
You're not a host, you're a
No.
producer. What does the producer do?
No, I love being a producer. I don't like being on the air. So what I do mostly is So the main show I produce is the local show on the Current with David Campbell. And he's been in the market a long time, and basically I assemble the playlist every single week. I get him all the information for his breaks and produce the in studios, any interviews he does. I prep him on everything he needs to talk about with his guests. And then I assemble everything at the end of the week, and then RTB it for air, which is ready to broadcast. I do it for other shows as well, like on the streams. I also do it for New Hot, which is our music director, David Safar's show. And then any other coverage that's not within a specific show, like just a regular in studio for the station, or a regular interview, or a live broadcast, I'll produce those as well, depending on who's available. So there's 4 main producers at the Current. They take care of a lot of those functions, but we don't have a service that gives us content, you know, so basically every single day we get in, starting with the morning show, and they start ripping stuff in from YouTube from the previous night with clips, and then that's how we start getting everything into our system every day.
Let me give you my card.
Yeah, right.
Getting your
Yeah, right.
service.
I know. So that's how that works. Yeah.
Sure. Paul, how does producing work on talk radio?
We have, every show on KFan has a set producer, and they simply, it's kind of, especially with KFan, and it's different on other talk stations. Like, I think with News Talk, the producer does not talk, like with Rush and all them, like it's just the host. But on our station, the producer gathers the information from what we use as the complete sheet. They get all that together. They have all kinds of stories and stuff they have from the night before, and they just kind of, the producer we have, Chris Hockey, he basically drives the car, and then the rest of us, he keeps us, as he says, in one lane, and then we kind of just, he gets us to our destination. And I think the producer, it's a lot of work. I mean, you look on the outside, and I think as everybody could tell you, you look on the outside and go, that doesn't sound too hard, but I think other than the host, it's a ton of work to be the producer, because you gotta be paying attention, you gotta know what you're talking about. Even if you don't, you have to sound like you know what you're talking about. It's a lot of work to be a producer on a regular morning show, or any, afternoons, all that. Producer's a pretty tough job. It's juggling a lot of different things.
Yeah. Did anybody do, did you do a lot of traveling before you settled where you are? I know.
Just Indiana to Reno to
Well,
Minnesota.
that's, I guess, could you just say something about how a lot of hosts especially spend a lot of time traveling from job to job?
Yeah, I guess, depends on who you are.
Oh, sure, yeah.
As far as your stability. I mean, Dave has been there, this is his 20th year. But at first, everyone hated him, and I think he thought he was going to get fired quite frequently. I don't know. I guess they say you haven't made it in radio unless you've been fired. I haven't been fired yet. Please God, I hope it doesn't happen soon. But I don't know. I feel like everyone knows everyone, because it's like such a small little community, because everyone's worked with someone else, and because you are constantly traveling, and you're like, oh, I worked with Sarah in Evansville, Indiana, now she's in Houston, and there's a girl in sales in Minnesota who's now in Houston with Sarah, and she knows her. I don't know, it's a small world, and you're gonna, I think also sometimes you can get lucky, like, and I'm not saying you didn't work hard to get where you are, but I'm saying but I'm not saying like not everyone gets to start out in Minnesota and end up on KFan. Most people have to start out in a small market. Like I started out market like 161 in Evansville, Indiana, that no one's ever heard of, and had to like go to Reno, Nevada, which is like market 121. I did not want to move to Reno at all, because I eventually wanted to get to a top 20 market. So not everyone is lucky enough to stay in Minnesota. So I think the reason a lot of people move is to keep building up to get to maybe a better position, a better paying position, a better show, a bigger market. So you kind of have to. And then a lot of people that don't make it out of like a smaller market, it's because they weren't willing to move.
Yeah.
Yeah, some people are perfectly happy in some of those smaller markets. They build a life, or they find a spouse or whatever, and they say, this isn't bad, I don't need the rat race.
And there's
Yeah.
a lot more
all the
stability
pressure.
usually in a smaller market,
Yeah.
usually.
There are people that love small market radio, that they love the atmosphere, the hometown feel of it, and they find a family, and they just kind of do it, and they prefer it over, like John said, the rat race of the big market radio.
Does anybody have any questions?
I would say to that, being a rat race to get there, when you get there, how much competition and pressure do you feel from below with those people that are either within your market or people from the outside that are really trying to push to get in and kind of point out like, maybe you need a new personality on this show? Like, is that pressure really there? I would even throw that at John too. I mean, with it being a station that is specifically programmed to, that there's only a certain amount of opportunities in every market, especially in a big, so like
Do you feel people
pressure.
nipping at your heels?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Daily.
Day.
Well, how did you get in at the current to begin with? You said you started at Radio K. Did they take you right out of Radio K?
I was a sophomore in college and at Radio K when I got hired at the current, and then that became a full-time position by the time I was a junior. So I had to leave Radio K and finish college, and I think that pissed a lot of people off. And I was super lucky. I was just really, really lucky. I came from Texas because I had listened to Radio K from there, because at that time the Dallas market was really, like the DFW market was really, really bad. It's now changed quite a bit. But you know, there's not really any true AAA non-profit radio stations left in the country, or non-commercial radio stations. And the ones that are there, like KUT or KXT or KCRW or WNYC, I mean, it's like those jobs never open. They never, ever, ever open. And when they do, you have hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of applicants from across the country, because the AAA format hardly exists anymore. It's just not a profitable model unless you're in the right market. And thank God Minneapolis St. Paul is a profitable market for it, but it's not
Well,
always
and
the
as
case.
far as programming the local stream, that's the HDs, or is
Yeah, I mean, there's the local show, the local current blog, and the local stream, which is an HD2 channel. Yeah,
Do you get an avalanche of submissions?
yeah, hundreds a week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hundreds a week?
Yeah,
Okay.
and
That will be culled down to maybe,
like
right,
10 to 20
yeah.
that actually get spun. And again, like local coverage, you'll be blessed to find a local market in any other city that has as much extensive coverage across all stations and formats than the Twin Cities. So that's why I don't take kindly to people who make fun of any of our local coverage. It just kind of angers me. But that's a different diatribe.
Well, and Fallon, you must have had audition, there must have been some competition to get on Dave Ryan's show.
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
you know how many people he auditioned?
He auditioned for 3 months straight.
And that was unique, because they had people, they don't always have people on the air trying out, but he was running
I remember
women
He
that.
through
would do
there.
multiple
Yeah.
people a day, because he didn't want to give any one person more than an hour, because if they're awful, then you're like, how do you say, okay, never mind, leave, right? We don't want you on for the next 3 hours. So it was kind of like everyone got a 1 hour audition, unless they had I think like a radio background, then he would, if they were flying in. But Clear Channel's cheap, so they're not going to fly in a bunch of people. So he did 3 months, and what happened was, the girl before me, Lena, she was a bank teller, and some guy who worked at like a stand-up comedy place recommended her and said she does improv and she's really funny, you should audition her. And they got really lucky, because I think everyone thinks that they can do radio. I think everyone's like, that's super easy. I could sit there and talk and be totally funny 24/7 because my friends say I'm funny. And so she was really great. And so I think that they thought, oh, well, maybe we'll get lucky again and find someone local and we can pay them super cheap and save the company money. And, Dave's like, what are the odds of that happening again? So for 3 months, they brought in, I think, maybe 3 people from out of state, and then every single other person was from Minnesota. And they just didn't have chemistry, and I stalked him. I stalked him like a crazy person, because I knew that the main email that they post on, like All Access or whatever, probably had hundreds of, people sending
The one
it to
that
that
goes to
email address.
HR.
Yeah, so Dave's not gonna, and Dave actually makes a joke that the reason I got the job is because his computer was from 1972, and every single time he would try to listen to someone's audio, his computer would freeze, and he got so mad he just gave up and settled on me. So I emailed a friend who used to work, be an intern for him, and got his personal email address and started emailing his personal email address, and then he's like, oh, you're okay. Make a video for me. So I made a 5-minute video, and then he never responded. I'm like, I hate my life. This is awful. I want to get out of Reno. And so then I was like, look, I own a lot of winter coats, and I will pay for my trip to interview with you, because Clear Channel wasn't going to pay for it. So I paid for my trip to interview with him. And He had been looking for 3 months. I interviewed on a Wednesday and Thursday and got the job Monday. So, I think once you know, you know. Though, like, I think you feel chemistry with someone, you just know. But, so am I terrified I'm going to lose my job every day? Yes. Because it's too good to be true, and I really love working there with him, so it's scary.
What can you do to stay the best? Like, why bring you to the morning show for middays? Because you did something, right?
They
saw something in you.
I think partly they didn't need, but it helps having sort of like the female voice of reason with like what they call themselves, two donkeys. So, there was that, and then I also like know how to do the board and that sort of thing.
Oh,
so I'm
okay.
the one doing the board and like doing the scheduling too for the show. So because we only have 3 people, we really like stretch on as far as like jobs. But I think they wanted me for a while. They just weren't able to sort of make that switch. Just like a lot of different reasons. And
Have they ever had a woman on the morning show?
no.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I never knew that.
Yeah. And so that was weird for them to sort of add a female.
Yeah.
And then, but yeah, I think that you do feel pressure that like people are sort of gonna like try to like slide in all the time. And it's not, I think the best way to sort of get in at a place, if you don't see like job postings at your favorite station, then just go there and offer to work for free. Like I've had 6 internships over the period of my life. And you know, if you have to work a stupid job for a year until you get hired, like to just to get in, like then that's not that long in the long run.
Like we'll go to St. Cloud or something, like a little bit smaller, and then so that they have the experience and can apply.
Mm-hmm.
Do interns really get hired?
Some.
Yeah.
I was an intern.
I was
There you
too.
go.
Yeah, I basically wouldn't leave. That was about it. Like, I had nothing to do, and I would just hang out, and I would just not leave. And then they hired me, and I was horrible at radio. I just even running the board, I was just a nervous wreck doing it. And then eventually, I just kind of got hold of it. But yeah, I got hired as an intern, yeah. Or hired from being an intern.
So almost everyone did, didn't they?
Yep.
At Nineball, we just hired an intern from Dave, who came so highly recommended for just 6 months.
Yeah,
and we
she's
love
great.
her already. So,
Take a part-time
You gonna
job.
hire her?
yeah, obviously, internships are, yeah.
Or be somebody's assistant, or be a part-timer on the weekends and work
Yeah,
your way in.
or promotional events. Radio seems to have almost as much to do with radio as promotional events, live events, getting out. Whether it's from, Menards on a Saturday morning, or whether it's, a booze cruise, or, why are promotional events in radio so linked? Or has anyone done a lot of promotional stuff? Or
Because they're putting a face to the voice.
Yeah.
That's the main primary thing.
do people come out to promotional events?
Oh, yeah.
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 Unless it's like at a car dealership.
You're sitting there with the
Who wants
salesman.
to have a car dealership on their Saturday if they're not looking for a car?
They have free
Maybe
hot dogs.
2 people will.
And
Balloons for
balloon
the
animals.
kids.
Yeah, I know. Free popcorn's a big selling point to get people out. Yeah, I guess it depends.
Isn't there an
Our
element
block.
too of like the people that are getting together and the stations knowing it, that in some ways they're also helping bring together the community of people that are also faceless to themselves and get together? I mean, I see with like any of the stations, whether it's a Kern or K-Fan, it's like those people getting to know each other through that medium also makes them stronger listeners to your station, and bringing them together with an event that comes together well sort of puts you as a name recognition and brand, like, I'm listening to this every day because
Yeah.
there's, whether it's the connection
Yeah.
to the people themselves, or they're meeting people at these events. They're like, hey, I met my wife at this thing that I went to for the Kern, or K-Fan, like, I knew, buddy that I'm going to see games for the Wild, like, met him at this event that they did for the Wild. I mean, I think that's what social media is, people searching, so.
Yeah.
I mean, that makes sense. I mean, is that sort of, those other meetings where you talk about those things, where the,
I don't think in that,
Intentionally?
maybe in that, I don't know if like, I think of it as like, oh, they might meet someone at our event and then that'll make them a loyal listener. I think our primary goal is to go out, represent the station well, and be like a nice, genuine person to them, and then they'll feel a connection with you, and like, I think once they have that connection with you, then they want to listen to you. It's like, oh, I met
Right.
Allie and she was is it just as nice as she sounds on the radio, and they become a loyal listener.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the public perception has a lot to do with listeners. 'Cause if you go out and you're just a mass, just a mass.
And some people are.
Some people are. There are a lot of
I don't
people.
know why.
There are a
I
lot
don't
of
know
people in
why.
this business that think that because they're on the radio that they're super important, and they're no more important than any of us. But then you become a dick, and then nobody wants to. The public perception is just as big as what you do on the radio, I think.
Well, I thought you said never have you encountered social media interaction like Minnesota, like Wisconsin. A lot of what John and I do, when the blog now is driving web traffic. Radio stations all about driving web traffic. The difference between, you said 3,000 and 30,000. So how does that change the show? What does that bring to you? Is that
Well, for us, I mean, I think, well, first of all, I'll be honest, we have web goals, so web is important to us. But
meaning
we want a certain amount of page views. The company requires certain, and they even in the past required a certain amount of Facebook likes. They got past that finally, okay, but they want a certain amount of page views, and so that's what we call our guy Derek, our web whore, because we always make jokes that he'll do anything for a page view. But now we're steering away from whore. He's the web drunk. He's the web drunk, so we're good now. But with social media, it's so important to us because more people want to interact with our show through texting and Twitter and Facebook now more so than calling in even. And we still get a ton of calls, but it's just that instant. You can instantly reply to someone, instantly answer. When are those tickets on sale? When is that? And it's just, I feel like it's strengthened the connection between you and a listener. And because sometimes the phone can ring and it's busy and they don't get through. But with that, you can almost automatically reply to them.
Well, John, at the current, I believe Andrea's whole job is just to create just blog posts.
Yeah, we have company-wide goals every single month for digital as well. And there's a strategic mission as well, like a 5-year plan for the digital portion of the company. And the most money in the company right now has been reinvested into the digital section. So that's extremely, extremely important. However, public radio is just now starting to figure out how to use social media. I mean, the running joke is always that public radio is 10 years behind the curve. And it's true, they are. A lot of the hosts, don't want to use that kind of stuff. And the listeners, sure as hell don't want to use it. The current's a lot different, but classical, good luck. There's no Twitter followers, there's no Facebook followers. And news is really trying to figure it out. Other news stations have figured it out already, and we look to them to emulate, our own products. So it's difficult.
Any other questions? Getting up on towards an hour.
I guess I'd ask another question on top of it. Does it matter, when I think about radio and I think about listening in general, does it matter thinking about a particular audience that there's some things that you actually might not care about, that you might be alienating a certain audience because they might not be people that you can get? For example, if someone is diehard into one particular thing and you know that you're only going to get them by programming that way, you're just kind of well, forget it. For classical would be the great example. It's we're not going to talk about Twitter because if we're being honest about our audience and who's going to support us, it's never going to be 20, 30-year-olds. It's just not a reality. Do you just sort of dismiss that? Or how do you find the balance? Because all the stations, you have a core demographic. How do you break out of that demographic, I guess, is what I'm trying to reach at. Do you just dismiss some of them?
No, I think a lot of the times what public radio does now is they use the advent of HD radio to create new streams as a new source of revenue. So for instance, NYC, WNYC in New York, they're a classical station, world renowned, but they have a specific demographic that has a lot of money. However, they want to tap into a younger artist or a younger audience. So what they did a few years ago is they launched Q2, which is a classical stream online that is only dedicated to modern minimalist chamber music. And it has proven to be awesome for them. Classical NPR just launched a choral stream because so much of our audience apparently loves just hearing choral music. The Current launched Heartland and Wonderground, which is just kids music, and the Local Current, which is all local music. Sometimes we do streams dedicated only to Black History Month and All Funk and Soul. I mean, we have the options to do that, which is great. And then we have advertising messages that run on all those streams. It brings in a little revenue, because we haven't figured out how to capitalize on it, but it's a way to try and figure it out.
And with the others, is there maybe sort of like, I would say maybe like with K-Fan, for example, I'm a guy that likes to listen to basketball, and so K-Fan kind of doesn't scratch that itch that I have as much, and so daily I listen to like a podcast that was originally from Canada, and now owned by the NBA, that's just all talking about NBA. In a lot of ways, like if you went towards all basketball talk, you'd be alienating like the demographic of where people are going in sports. Is there like, sort of like, well, if we cover too much of this, we're missing the rest of this, but, you know, that's, you know, we're gonna stay with the football, baseball, hockey, because that's tried and true, and just kind of leave that to other people because we know that this is our bread and butter, and that's fine.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's got to do with, like I said earlier, with how well the team's doing it. I think from a sports standpoint, if it's football, it doesn't matter. If they're good
Right.
or they're bad, it's once a week. Basketball is every other day, hockey's every other day, baseball seems to be every 15 minutes. But you get, with basketball, it's kind of I wouldn't say it's a niche sport like hockey, but when the Wolves have been so poor as they've been, and it hasn't been really a big market, and mostly in this market, you know, some of the teams, like the Wolves, they used to promote that, well, come see Kobe, come see LeBron. I mean, local people here aren't gonna, you know, you don't wanna hear about it, but as the team now is getting hotter, more people will start talking about it. But with the football, no matter how good they are, people talk about it. That's the difference of being a smaller sport. Not that basketball, hockey, or baseball is a smaller sport. When they're good, they're just cast aside. But if they're bad, they're cast aside. If they're good, then everybody will talk about it. And I think with basketball, that's the beauty with K-Fan is you got the morning show where we just talk about just about anything. But Paul Allen, 9 to noon, he's sports. So that's kind of the beauty of the gauntlet of K-Fan is you get one or the other. But yeah, I think it has a lot to do with how good the team's doing.
And I mean, based in the market, Wolves are always sort of, basketball's always sort of fourth tier.
Sure.
In this market where hockey is sort of generally more popular.
Yeah,
I mean, we have like high school hockey where they sell out the Excel, and that doesn't happen in most states.
Yeah, like if you went to Indiana where I'm from, it would be like basketball
Right.
#1. We would never talk about hockey probably
Yeah.
at all. So, same, well, and for us, you get, we don't have the option of doing like different levels of, I don't know, like, music or anything like that. So for us, I mean, you have to pick, yeah, you have your key demographic. People think of KDWB as like a kiddie station. That's absolutely not our demographic at all. We don't try to cater to kids. You're gonna hear a One Direction song occasionally because it's pop music and it's charting. Especially our show, Dave's show, we do not cater to children at all. So we obviously will day part things a little bit, and what I mean by that is if we're going to talk about sex, we'll try to wait until 8 o'clock when kids are in school. But it's not always the case, but we do try to. But we know what our demographic likes and cares about. And you know, Dave always says stuff like this, like if like there's something huge going on with like the government shutdown, if you want to hear about the government shutdown, you need to go over to whatever news talk station, because that's not what we do. We want to have fun on our show, so we usually won't change what we're doing to narrow into like maybe some people that aren't as interested. We, you know, try to reach the largest audience we can. And ours is, yeah, females like 18 to 34, and we do get the 25 to 54 group as well, but mostly females.
And what is, curiosity, is like demo breakdown that you sort of like for each of the stations? If you know that right off the top of your head, because I'm
The
guessing
Current
all
is more male-oriented and mostly like 30-year-old white men who love rock music. And it's typically what it is. And we made an effort to play many more women as of late, but that was never typically the case, especially when the Current launched. So.
What's 93X?
Males, surprisingly.
Which age?
Yeah.
18 to
18, 34, something like that.
yeah. Go on.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask Paul about something like a niche sport, just to follow up on what we were talking about.
Yeah.
With like something like NASCAR. Do you have discussions about how popular that is, how much time to devote to something like that? I know there's like weekend shows and there's some
Yeah.
NASCAR coverage, but when you get into something like that,
Yeah, I think it also really has to do with the relevance of it. And I think, and no offense to anybody if they're a NASCAR fan, but I think personally a NASCAR would be an instant channel change. You know, if you turn on K-Fan at 7 in the morning and Jimmy Johnson needs 2 points to, you know, get into, people go, what? And they instantly change the channel.
right.
But I mean, Chris Hockey, the producer of the morning show, is a big NASCAR guy, but I think you kind of stick to the main 4 things, but I think we kind of like Fallon's show where if you want to talk hardcore sports, you turn on 1500, because we're not going to talk hardcore sports, because to us, hardcore sports is boring, you know, I mean, it's just, it's talking, you know, what did they do with the second inning, it's repetitive, everybody does that, and it's just, you don't want to, I mean, maybe you do, and if that's your thing, great, but it's kind of tough, but yeah, niche sports are, you know, almost an instant channel changer, I would think. I mean, maybe people are into it, but I couldn't see like
Is that pretty
NASCAR.
unique? Do you know other sports stations around as far as that use, you kind of use sports as like a jumping off point for personality talk kind of stuff that has nothing to do with sports, or just kind of has that as the basis?
Yeah, I think, like I was saying, I think our biggest competitor, 1500, they are like, and I've heard, but I would assume that because when I listen to them every once in a while, and it's sports. There's no bend to it. There's no, like, they'd start talking about something and we would tangent off into talking about the Kool-Aid Man or just something super random, where they wouldn't, because there's whoever their boss is. I think a few people in the room may know who it is, but they are told, ESPN, that this is not a, joke is probably the wrong word, but this isn't, we're here to talk sports.
Right.
And they seem to think that it will work, but I think in today's age, you can get sports anywhere, a
Yeah.
podcast anywhere, Dan Patrick, I mean, you can get your hardcore sports anywhere. And if everybody did the same thing, it would just kind of it'd be boring, I think, it's just my opinion. Because you could just, sports podcasts, you get 1 million of them on Google, and it's basically the same breakdown, just in a different.
You're doing the same thing that music stations are doing too, where you're using, they can get their music anywhere, but they
Yeah.
can't get the personality intermingled.
Mhm.
You're using sports in that same way
Mhm.
as your basic, yeah, we are a sports station, but we're giving you all this personality and these other
Yeah,
things too.
I think it's any kind of morning show. I think that's the beauty of a morning show is it's the personality. You want to hear, you know, what Allie did on Friday night, even though she says she may have just gone home, or what Fallon.
We actually, we read a book to our cats, so
Yeah, you know,
that's
like,
nice.
but people want to hear that, other than, well, they picked the guy off at first, and they shouldn't have done that, and they pulled the pitcher in the 8th inning. No one, I mean, people care, but you can't, 3 hours of that is, I mean,
Well, even
boring.
putting morning show prep together every day, it's all supposed to, all the stories, no hard news, no sports, and nothing. It's all supposed to be just sort of general interest, entertainment, topic driven. Like, today a woman went to pick up her vehicle that had gotten towed, and she got in a cursing match, and they charged her $150 more
Yeah.
for it than the other people. There's something to be said about that. That's fair. That's not fair. I know a guy I'd like to charge for his swear. It's all supposed to promote conversation. Like Paul says, if it was just straight reporting, you'd have NPR News or you'd have something completely different. It's all about personalities, the honest personality. Cool. Anything else?
Jumping back to demographics, I was just curious, Fallon, if you had any more specific statistics about the KDWB listening audience.
I mean, as far as like, I mean, we're.
Because I know pop music is, it has a very broad base.
I mean, I'd say we narrow in between like in the mid, like if we picked a person and we imagined we were talking to a person, I'm assuming she's probably going to be 27, 28, 29, because she probably has a job, she's not super happy about it, like she probably graduated from college, she probably already has a kid.
Huh.
If you really broke it down, like thought who you're talking to, but like you said, it does reach, because I mean, like especially like on our show, Dave's show, we get the 25 to 54-year-olds a lot as well, but we would focus in maybe in that middle area between 18 to 34 probably is our like key demographic.
From the salespeople have all the, what percentage of the listeners went to college, what percentage of them work full-time, how many kids they have, all that kind of stuff. It really does get broken down, that the people on the air may not necessarily know all that stuff off the top of their heads, but I've seen those kinds of reports from radio stations that salespeople use that a lot, especially when they're dealing with national clients that they're trying to get to sell commercial time to.
People have begun to notice that the radio stations in the Twin Cities, the audiences, demographics are starting to overlap a lot more regardless of format, which is why everybody's trying to tap into each other's listenership. That's
Yeah.
why you're going to hear Ward on like 6 different stations in the Twin
Yes.
Cities. Because everybody wants those advertising dollars, and they want to get those demographics.
Those advertising dollars that have never been stronger or worth more.
Yeah.
That's why radio's good. I guess that's a good place to stop. It's about an hour. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone watching online.
Thanks for coming in,
Yeah.
guys.
Thanks.